Salutations, everybody. It is Matty here today, and we are getting into some absolutely massive Xbox news. There's a lot of subjects that Xbox fans have long debated. We've done so on our Xbox podcast, Defining Duke, with myself and Lord Cognito, but finally, we have clear-cut answers on everything. Is there an Xbox handheld in development? Yes, there is, but it's years away, and I think that's really bad news if you look deeply at the handheld market and where it's at and where it will be in a couple of years from now. Also, what's going on with Xbox exclusives? Can any game come to PlayStation? The answer is, as it always has been, just Xbox is being very clear about it now, yes. What does this mean for the future of Xbox in a console market where they're becoming more and more like Valve? We're going to get into that. Is Xbox still interested in acquiring companies? They've said as much before, but have doubled down on that. Just it's not anything happening soon. And so much more to get into. A lot of this information, for those who took an objective look at the future of Xbox, will not be too surprised at what they find here. And the only shocking part of it all will be how clear Xbox is actually being about these sorts of things, where their biggest misstep, I think, for this generation has always been messaging. So I appreciate how clear they are being here. But myself and others who talked about Xbox and their future and said exclusives are done and gone, they're probably still going to do hardware, have continuously been accused of fanning the flames of Xbox controversy for the sake of our own gain, which makes no sense, especially in my case. Like, I just talk about everything, and I'm lucky enough to do pretty well with that, so I don't need to lean into one controversy or the other. In fact, I can just step completely around it if I really felt like it. But this is just an honest assessment of what's going on here with Xbox, and I think it's a fascinating look because you have Nintendo and PlayStation taking a very traditional approach to the market, still doing their exclusives, still making their deals, but Xbox is going full multi-plat. Like, that is confirmed here. And what it means for their future is they're going to make a lot of money, but they might be treated differently on the market from other platform holders. We're going to get into it, but ladies and gentlemen, if you're new here and you're interested in what's going on with Xbox, we talk about it a lot here. We talk about it a lot on Last Stand Media with our Defining Duke Xbox podcast. So check either of those out. Consider subscribing. With that, let's begin at the top of this Bloomberg article titled Microsoft's Gaming Chief is Still Looking for Acquisitions and Sees Future Growth. Quote, "We definitely want to be in the market, and when we can find teams and technology and capability that add to what we're trying to do in gaming at Microsoft, absolutely we will keep our heads up," end quote, Spencer said. Still, there is nothing imminent, and very large deals are probably off the table at present as the company is spending a lot of time absorbing Activision Blizzard employees, he said. So out of everything here, this is probably the least surprising news if you pay attention to Xbox. They said in the middle of acquiring Activision Blizzard that they are going to be more aggressive with acquisitions. And why do you do that? Well, you just beat the FTC, the CMA. You've beat every regulator on the market when it comes to acquiring the maker of Call of Duty. Like, you have the #1 grossing IP in gaming pretty much. So everyone else, by comparison, is small fry. And this emboldens a company like Microsoft to go out and acquire more until someone finally stops them. Now, they are waiting, as they mentioned here, to fully absorb Activision Blizzard. I think this is a good thing because with Bethesda, we learned with Redfall how truly disconnected the pipeline from Xbox was, and that the assumption is, like, Bethesda is not still operating on their own. They are very much part of Xbox, and the expectations increase because of that. So what targets would they have in mind? I think #1, you have to look at AAA developers who provide a great mobile outlook. One example that comes to mind is Square Enix. They really invest in mobile gaming a lot, but they obviously have big AAA IP in something like Final Fantasy. But you have to look at where Xbox is targeting growth. It is PC and it is mobile. I do think the days of them getting core single-player developers, your Bethesdas, your Obsidians, inXiles, Compulsion Games, I think that's done. I think that's been done for a while. The acquisition of Activision Blizzard told us as much, but I do think the attempt to get games that are just hardcore single-player titles, like, they have almost 20 studios that can do that for them, and then some now with Activision Blizzard in the fold. So I feel like Xbox is done chasing that golden goose, and now they're looking for things to surround their business that will offset AAA costs, as we'll get into a bit when we talk about their now delayed mobile store. Next up, though, what we have here is Microsoft saying they want to diversify the teams working on games by looking more to China, he said. The company developed a new version of Age of Empires, which is a world-building franchise that first appeared in the 1990s, by partnering with Tencent, who we'll talk about in just a moment. Microsoft and Tencent released the game globally in October. It's been a really good area for us to learn from creative teams that have real, unique capability, Spencer said. The opportunity is to partner with creative teams in China for global. Now, why is China significant here? Well, Tencent has their tendrils in everything, and I mean literally everything. Like, I just learned this past week they have 30% ownership of Larian Studios, who made Baldur's Gate 3, and everyone really touts them as like the crowdfunded, globally supported independent studio, but they have Tencent in their pocket even as well. Another example is Remedy, developers of like Alan Wake 2. They have agreements with Tencent. Like, Tencent is everywhere, and money talks when you have boats of it, right? I'm open-minded to this, but we must remind people that Tencent has attempted in the past to creatively control developers before, and that has mattered less and less to big developers who have jumped ship for what Tencent is building. So you have people like Sean Layden, the former head of PlayStation Studios, joining Tencent. You have Hideaki Itsuno, a 30-year Capcom vet director who headed up titles like Devil May Cry, Dragon's Dogma 2 this year, now jumping ship for Tencent's Lightspeed Japan Studios. So Tencent is out there, but this makes sense because Xbox has missed the boat on China, famously skipping out on the now viral and extremely successful and kind of low-key good Hoyoverse with Genshin Impact. This has always been Xbox's Achilles heel. They wait for someone, in this case with Genshin Impact, PlayStation to catch the wave, and then Xbox dives in. They found success with games like Palworld and High on Life when it comes to virality, so it's not all doom and gloom, but their dramatically shrunken efforts in regions like Japan have just led to them being a purely US console, with global growth being tough to come by. So teaming up with China makes a lot of sense. And so you look at games like Black Myth Wukong, which were extremely successful in China and sold a ton of PS5s, and Xbox notes that and says, well, we want to grow there, and so that's how they're partnering with Tencent. Now, after this, we get into handhelds a bit. The executive who had repeatedly professed his admiration for handheld game devices said the expectation is that we would do something in that category. Although the company is working on prototypes and considering what it might do, Spencer also asked his group to look at the market and develop its vision based on what it learns. Such a device is a few years out, he said. In the coming months, designers and engineers will focus on making the Xbox app work better on existing portable devices and partnering with hardware makers to make sure their product syncs with Xbox games and experiences, he said. The Xbox app right now is good rather than great on some gadgets, he said. Longer term, I love us building devices, Spencer said, and I think our team could do some real innovative work, but we want to be informed by learning and what's happening now. For those who have been Xbox fans for a while or who have covered Xbox for a while, you probably read this with as much frustration as I did. It's easily the most annoying part of the entire article here because of how purely avoidable it was. Number one, we already saw Xbox was partnering up with people like, say, Asus with their ROG Ally to see what was going on there, and they had Xbox kind of built into the back end. It was an Xbox-focused device. Same thing with Logitech G Cloud Gaming, right? This handheld was all about cloud gaming, and Xbox Cloud Gaming came packed in. There was a gaming mode that you could turn on for it, and I love both these devices. In particular, my Logitech G Cloud still gets a ton of reps from me. But in that moment there, I remember myself and Lord Cognito saying Xbox is clearly doing a little R&D. How do these handhelds work? How is our app functioning on these? And I've never really had an issue with their app on these handhelds, but there have been tons of complaints about the Xbox app, broadly speaking. The PC app is atrocious. And when you go on something like the ROG Ally, where the PC app is there, because it's basically a handheld PC, it's terrible, even with the adjustments that they have continued to make. It's awful. And this has been a complaint, not just recently, like for years, for at least the entire generation, but a little bit before that. The Xbox app has notoriously been bad for a lot of people. And to read that it's now holding up Xbox's plans enough where they are saying, hey, look, we have to learn more. We have to research more before we make these adjustments to our app, and then we'll work on the handheld, is so frustrating because of how avoidable it is. Now, what this means is, in my opinion, Xbox is on a timer. PlayStation has reportedly been working on their own handheld, and obviously the Switch successor will have some sort of handheld capability. Xbox finally has the opportunity to get a step ahead of PlayStation and control their own messaging, but with it being years out, I actually see PlayStation getting ahead of them. And why does this matter? Well, PlayStation has a pedigree with handhelds. The PSP was a monstrous success, and the Vita has freaks like me who are still absurdly dedicated to playing it and praying PlayStation goes back to working on something like it. Many share that feeling, and I think if PlayStation gets the drop on Xbox, then they're going to appear to the public the same way I described with China, the late bloomer, the follower, and in turn, I think it's going to impact their hardware sales. Because, for example, Series X is a great console. No problem with smart delivery. Anything that I needed next-gen upgrades on was automatic. Game Pass is there. Great exclusives are there. Great third-party support is there. it has a lot of the chops that you're really looking for. But the console itself isn't selling because of these decisions where Xbox continuously misses out, and PlayStation at the very least feels like the safest bet to ensure that you're going to get your hands on, the games that you ultimately see and want to buy. At least there's a higher percentage chance. That's what you're really looking for, because at the end of the day, exclusive deals are still kind of happening lightly on the Xbox side of things. So when I see that their handheld plans are years behind, I'm like, that's terrible news for them, because I do feel like PlayStation is going to get a step ahead of them. Xbox is going to look like the follower, the last in the market after Steam goes. Nintendo's obviously already out there, who started this whole thing. Asus ROG Ally's there, Logitech G Cloud's out there, Razer's out there, PlayStation steps in, and then here comes Xbox. It's just, people have already picked their handheld by that point, and they'll be in the same exact situation they are in with their current devices. Their whole mantra about being on every screen makes sense, and they actually talk about pricing at the end of all of this, which I think is fascinating, because it seems like they're trying to keep costs low. But this is still, I think, a risky venture because of the timing and how it could bite them in the ass big time. I do think feature support goes a really long way. Like, if Xbox allows me to play Steam games on my handheld Xbox, that's a huge step for me. If it is a all-in-one library, that could be the ultimate system for many people. So I'm hoping they do provide great value like that. That's the one thing I've said. Let me play these games natively, and let me play other PC launchers on this Xbox handheld, and you've got me won over. Next up is the mobile store. The company's planned online store for mobile games has been delayed as the group does additional research on the market, Spencer said. Now, Xbox President Sarah Bond had announced the store in May with a planned release date of July, but staffers are still talking to mobile developers, including those responsible for Microsoft-owned Candy Crush and Call of Duty Mobile, to figure out a plan, which we saw recently. Phil was visiting some of these teams. As regulatory cases involving Apple Inc.'s iOS and Alphabet Inc.'s Android mobile stores work their way through courts in various countries, Microsoft still doesn't have an effective way to get its own store on mobile fronts. I'll keep this one brief, but this is more significant than I think people are giving it credit for, because a lot of Xbox's future business hinges on this. And the difference for them is they are swinging the biggest. They are not going for just making games on mobile, which I thought was originally the plan. They want to make a whole mobile storefront. They want to take their piece of the pie, just like they're doing on PC, just like they're doing on console. So this is a big part of their future revenue growth plans. And if it is getting pushed back, I do wonder if that cascades into other AAA development projects whatsoever. I hope not, after all the layoffs they've done to try to stabilize the business, and Phil saying he feels great about where the business is heading. But I do wonder about this sort of thing, because these companies are exploring things like live service and mobile because they're trying to offset AAA costs. So if you're kind of delaying your mobile plans, does that offset anything that's currently happening over at Xbox? We'll see. But next up is the big one, the end of exclusivity. They say after first releasing the batch of Xbox games for PlayStation and Nintendo Switch, Spencer is pleased with the results. Microsoft will do more of that, he said, and won't rule out any game in Microsoft's stable. Quote, "I do not see sort of red lines in our portfolio that thou must not," he said. "It's too early to make any sort of decision on the next Halo," he said, end quote. So, I mean, like, anyone who thought that it was going to stop at those four in Pentiment, Grounded, Sea of Thieves, as well as Hi-Fi Rush, was kidding themselves. And I don't mean to be harsh about this, but that is the reality here. Is a lot of people were getting angry at folks like me who were saying it's not going to stop there, and claiming we were dooming, claiming we were fanning the flames of chaos. But only a couple months later in June, Phil was saying, oh, by the way, we're going to do more of that, right? Like, we're going to do more of that. Kind of just threw it out there, and people reacted less. And now they're drawing the line again, much more loudly, saying literally anything can go. And it's only been how many months removed from it? This all happened in April, so we're like 7 months removed from it. They have accelerated dramatically in those plans. And I think for those who are really caught off guard by this, it's because you got to pay closer attention to these sorts of things, because Xbox, immediately when they released even one single game over to PlayStation, did two things. Number one, they have brought every future exclusive on the Xbox platform into question. And number two, they devalued their console efforts significantly. Why would you buy an Xbox if these games will come to PlayStation or Switch anyway? However, the lack of a red line was them finally saying the quiet part out loud. Stating that it's too early to say anything on Halo is, simply put, a lie. They very much know that the next Halo game will probably go to PlayStation. They have to develop that version anyway. It's not just like they copy the file and paste it over on PlayStation, but they know that their multi-platform game plan needs some legs first before they go all out with defining exclusives like Halo, like Gears E-Day, where at that point, they're going to count on you being used to seeing Xbox games go to PlayStation. The loudest pop most recently was Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, where their just one more thing announcement was bringing a Xbox exclusive that Xbox fans had yet to enjoy over to PlayStation. And I talk about this in a future video we're making on Indiana Jones. I do wonder how that has an impact on Indiana Jones day one, where it is exclusive to Xbox and PC, and how many gamers are going to say, I'll wait for it to come to PlayStation, where there will be patches, maybe DLC, and it's going to run better potentially, etc., etc. So Xbox knew all of this, if they were smart at least, was going to happen when they announced one game coming over to PlayStation. They knew the floodgates had to open at that point in time. There was no question marks. And the question marks were building up before that. The Blade game that got announced, they weren't putting Xbox imagery on it. They weren't putting Game Pass on it. People were just like, what is going on here? Like, why can't you commit to exclusivity? And it's because they knew this was the next step. They wanted to break down the wall, go multi-platform in a chase for more game sales and more revenue. This has always been their play. And as much as it stings to see, because Xbox finally, I feel, got to the point they needed to be at, where they had all these single player games and AAA exclusives like PlayStation 4 had, and they were really getting into their flow, and then they stop right here. It's frustrating if you've been tracking Xbox for a while, but looking at how their business is evolving, this seemed pretty obvious. They're just, again, as I said earlier, saying the quiet part out loud. Now, to wrap up this article, Phil says the Xbox business has never been more healthy. This is after a ton of layoffs, citing growth in cloud and PC gaming, as well as usage for console. The business is performing right now, and I think that means a more healthy future for hardware and the games we build. Spencer also said he feels optimistic about the growth of mobile games. I feel pretty good about where the industry is going, he said. To reach new players, we need to be creative and adaptive of new business models, new devices, new ways of access. We're not going to grow the market with $1,000 consoles, end quote. Which I do view as a bit of a jab at the PlayStation 5 Pro. And it is a very important statement from Xbox. Above all of this stuff, what people are going to care about long-term, they are betting on, is value. That's what Game Pass is all about. Games are getting more expensive. You can access hundreds of them with one subscription service that you can join and leave whenever you want. Xbox is betting on that being a big part of gaming's future as more and more games come out. The same thing they're kind of saying here is, we're not going to grow gaming with $1,000 devices. This probably means they're leaning into cloud gaming a lot with their next sort of console device, whatever that may be, that their handheld should hopefully be reasonably priced. That if they want to grow, they want to keep things low. An interesting recent statistic we did learn is that the Series X did outsell the Series S by a little bit. It wasn't like a dramatic split between the two, but that does show that the little man, the Series S, is doing decent enough on the market. And it's probably because of the price tag it's there for. It was the easy sort of, you had money to blow console purchases you make to ensure that you could access Game Pass, that you could access exclusives when they come around. You would, of course, be trading off performance and fidelity at times for certain games that weren't optimized for it. That was the risk you took with it. But for a lot of people, the price spoke a lot. And Xbox sold tens of millions of consoles. Now, with that in mind here, I think this does put into shape what you can expect for handhelds, future consoles, is that they want to keep the price low. What that means and exactly what they lean into technology-wise, whether it be their cloud streaming tech or not, is going to be very interesting to see. I mean, we did have that leak that suggested Xbox's next console will be a hybrid between some sort of cloud gaming device and traditional console. So we'll see what it is at the end of the day. But nonetheless, fascinating news from Xbox today, just confirming a lot of uncertainty around the future of Xbox. And the lack of reaction online is telling. Like, I signed on, saw this news, let me immediately check Twitter and see how on fire it is. A lot of people were like, yeah, okay, got it. Like, I'm going to keep my PlayStation then. Very indifferent to it, which I think is worse than people being angry, frankly, because at least anger means there might be some passion or some spirit left, but a lot of people seeing it, shrugging their shoulders and, oh, okay, sounds good. I don't think that's a great sign for Xbox in some ways, and that they really do need to revitalize the fan base one way or the other. And I do think that handheld would be a big way of doing it, but if they're going to wait years to do it, that window might be closed by the time they could activate people's hype once more. So we'll see what happens. But nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, just some thoughts on this interview here with Phil Spencer and Bloomberg. Let me know your thoughts down below. Other than that, I'll catch all of you in the next video. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.